You're very welcome to this morning's CPD. My name is James Lonergan. I'm Director of Education and CPD with SCSI. I'm just delighted to announce this morning's CPD and to welcome you all. We have three speakers today: Dermot Kelly, Ross Griffin, and Elia Gonzalez Salas. Before I introduce the speakers, just a couple of things I'd like to mention. We are launching today a guidance document that was authored by the three speakers today. And also just would like to acknowledge Rory Hayden, who was a co-author of the document, who couldn't join us today, but was contributed to the authorship of the document. I'd also like to give a mention to Noel Walsh, who's chair of our BIM QS working group, and the working group also contributed to the guidance document. We're going to share a link to the document in the chat, so you'll be able to access it, and we'll also have a recording from today's webinar at that link available to you as well. So I hope you'll find that useful. So just before I hand over to Dermot, I'll introduce today's speakers. So we have Elia Gonzalez Salas. Elia has focused her career on commercial management as a consultant and contractor from Denmark, Spain, and abroad. She spent many years working in an engineering company as a building engineer, allowing her to acquire great technical experience as well as an understanding of the public sector after working on the Urban Planning Permission Department for the City Council of Madrid. Ross Griffin is originally from Limerick, but has spent most of the last 10 years living with his wife in Copenhagen in Denmark. Ross has been working in the construction industry for nearly 20 years for contractors and consultants, and he has a BSc and MBA in construction management from the College of Estate Management in Reading. He is MRICS and MCIOB as well. Ross's passion is progress and change for the greater good, both professionally and personally, changing the way we deliver projects through technology so that the industry becomes more efficient and reduces waste. Ross works with his company in Denmark, progressing the Nordic understanding of the quantity surveying profession in collaboration with the RICS Nordic and other dedicated professionals. Dermot Kelly, Dr. Dermot Kelly is a chartered quantity surveyor and has over 25 years experience in the construction industry in both the US and Ireland in quantity surveying, construction management and project controls. In 2007, he joined the School of Surveying and Construction Management in TU Dublin and is currently delivering modules in quantity surveying and construction management programs. And he has experience and carried out extensive research in the areas of digitization in construction, sustainability and life cycle costing. And Dermot also completed a PhD in leveraging BIM for LCC in 2016. And he collaborates with numerous BIM technology vendors, educating students and practitioners in digitization on BIM, as well as providing consultancy services in the same. So we have a lot of expertise in the room today, and I'll pass over to Dermot to get us started. Thanks for joining us, Dermot.
Thanks very much. Thanks, James. Good introduction. And I'm happy to be here. We were here back in July or August. And since then, we've progressed what we were discussing in relation to providing and publishing an information paper. So as James says, that's provided for you guys to take a look at. A lot of what I'm going to go through today is touching on that, just to make you aware of what the content of it is, what you can get from it as a QS practitioner, either working in a contractor's firm or working elsewhere in the PQS office. Or otherwise, and you know, get you on the road to maybe utilizing building information models if you haven't already. Just kind of letting you know that it's not as daunting as it seems, and possibly where to start and how to get going, and what's the different terminology and workflows that are associated with that. So I'm going to keep going. So route for the QS into the 4D and 5D digitized workflow. It's been a long time coming. I'm delighted that it has been published today. Excuse a few typos. We were kind of rushing at the last minute to get it ready for today, so there's a few little bits and pieces, not that noticeable, but if you do see a wrong spelling or maybe a hyperlink not working, excuse us, and we will fix them when it gets up onto the website. But for the most part, everything that we wanted to get across is on there. So what does this document do? It's an information paper, I suppose, rather than a guidance notes. A lot of the guidance notes that get released by the RICS are quite procedural orientated and kind of hold bearing in possibly in a court of law in respect of following them. This isn't an ARM type document or NRM type document or even a guide to something like life cycle costing. It's an information paper for you guys to take a look through and possibly not even to read from start to finish, to kind of pick through as needed in terms of where you are at with your kind of BIM, I suppose, a stage in learning this and learning about this. So it's an academia and industry report, collaboration between TU Dublin and Delighted as well, the Society of Chartered Surveyors. It's not just an academic paper. We had a lot of contributors, obviously from industry in terms of our co-authors, Leanne and Ross and Rory, and we had a significant working group, as well as support from the BIM QS working group. So you'll see there in the names of our working group, we've some good, sound, knowledgeable practitioners in the field of BIM, proofreaders, peer reviewers, etc. So we didn't just send this out. It's not just our own ideas. We got input from industry in that regard, and I'm delighted that it's a document that I think is going to carry some weight and is probably more utility to you guys as an information paper, as a guide, if you want to call it that, on BIM than some of the other publications are, in respect to being a little bit too complex to get your head around and be more focused on the kind of procurement and past 1192 or level 2 kind of side of things. This is more to do with, you know, purely directed towards quantity surveyors in Ireland in that regard. So let's take just a quick look. What's the basis of it? Well, I'm sure you've seen plenty of slides like this. What's wrong with what we do? Well, it depends on your perspective. Probably not a whole lot if you're right in the middle of it. But if you take a deeper look at the construction industry, it's very fractious. Information flows are chaotic, and we're, you know, that word, of course, that we're in silos. We tend to be in our own discipline and focus on our own discipline and not necessarily concentrate on the bigger picture. So that particular slide there shows a specific owner team, and it's probably a bit optimistic in relation to the owner team are all around the same table, as well as the design team and construction team. And even at that, you know, your design team might necessarily be collaborating effectively and efficiently. So BIM puts a different workflow on that, and I know we talk about BIM as a process. I'm going to focus it more on the technology today, but keep in mind that because of all the technologies out there in building information modeling and digitization, there has to be a process that drives it, and that could be and has been for another day in respect to possibly what's coming down the line in Ireland in relation to a level 2 mandate, or roadmap, or direction in relation to utilizing BIM in the public sector. Okay, moving on from that, I'm not sure what I showed you previously is any better than that slide there. That's a lot of different technologies and processes in relation to building information modeling, be it data management tools, conceptual modeling tools, parametric modeling, clash detection, environmental modeling, focus on collaboration, common data environments, all those buzzwords that you might hear or might not hear. But without, again, as I said, without the people and the methodology behind it, it really won't be a successful endeavor. It won't be a successful process. So again, so that's for another day. We're going to focus on the 5D aspect of building information modeling, and that is cost, and 4D, of course, being time. So again, another statistic that I like to throw up, even for my students, is looking at the construction industry, and I'm not an economics, from a productivity point of view. So I don't know the ins and outs of how these metrics is put together, but from a productivity point of view, and this is a US metrics, the construction industry is underperforming compared to other industries. We used to do okay. I suppose what this is saying is that over time, at least since the 1960s, we're not being as competitive as we should be. We're not being as productive, or not being as efficient. So whether BIM is the answer to that, I don't know, but it could help. We're on the very early tentative stages of it, so we'll see what happens. But it certainly is a more collaborative environment, a more kind of inclusive environment, way of working, and the procurement systems in relation to working in building information modeling will possibly have to change to include that collaborative environment. But again, that's something that will be worked out in due course. So route into QS, why are we worried about building information modeling? Well, Noel, our chairman in the SCSI BIM QS working group, does a good forward in the document in relation to why we should be working in BIM, or working with BIM, or thinking about BIM, thinking about digitization. I always ask this question to my students. I say, well, I do a little poll, you know, do you think in 2 years' time, you're going to be measuring from 2D drawings still? You know, and I get a certain proportion of people saying yes or no. And then do you think in 5 years' time you will? Do you actually think in 10 years' time, you're going to be doing what you do right now with your 2D drawings in terms of either manual takeoff or on-screen takeoff? Do you actually think that you're going to, with all the technology that is available in the world, do you actually think you're going to be doing that? And, you know, it just depends when. It's not if anymore, you know, it's when. So I just want you to think about that. That's a big question to answer, but I think it's coming whether we like it or not. Just like, can't argue about climate change anymore. It's just there. It's the facts, the science are behind it. Well, we're going to have to get on board here. All the other disciplines have. We're just lagging behind a little bit. I know that's a bit controversial, but all the statistics and research, being an academic, prove that as QSs, we're not as up to speed as the rest of the construction industry and the rest of the disciplines are. So the document looks at 5D BIM, 4D BIM, pays a little bit more attention to actually what you do with your model from a mapping and processing perspective, and I'll explain that in a second. I did it last year, or last August. I'll go into a little bit more detail possibly, or if you've forgotten, give you a quick reboot on it. And then Leah and Ross will look at their own experiences and possibly kind of planning your measurement with BIM and issues to look out for troubleshooting. What I like about this document is it's quite practical. It doesn't expound this great benefit of BIM and you have to get on board and this is what you need to do right now. It kind of sets out a realistic version of what BIM is, what it is for us. Dip your toes in the water, get a model, have a look at it. If you're just using it for visualization purposes, that's a first step. Then maybe when you're a little bit more comfortable with that, do a quick takeoff. You know, do the quick automated, what I call BIM dump. It's my own word, but it's good. It's good analogy. Extract the quantity, see what can be used, what can't be used, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. Make it, you know, go on your own pace. And that's essentially what this document is all about. So from a BIM perspective, what do we see, but what is underpinning it all? And I don't want to focus too much on this because it could be another number of CPD events on this. You've got the BIM deliverables and their, you know, your dimensions, be it thermal analysis, scheduling, cost, time, whatever it is. And then you got all the requirements underpinning building information modeling, your ISO 19650, your past documents, your whole level 2 documentation, CIC protocol, etc., etc. Goes on and on and on. There's a whole nother world of study to be done on that side of things. But I suppose what we think, or at least what I think you think when you think of BIM, is you're thinking of visualization, you're thinking of maybe more automated quantities, you're thinking of the drawings being a little bit more coordinated than they are, you're thinking of hardware, you're thinking of software, you're thinking of training, and that's essentially what I thought probably 10 years ago when I was getting a little bit more interested in this. Understanding BIM is about understanding information, and that's what it's all about. Don't get put off or sidetracked by how pretty the drawing looks or how pretty the 3D visualization of that particular drawing looks. It's really the information in the drawing, and the information is disseminated in a completely different way than what we're used to in terms of drawings and specifications. So we can see on the left-hand side here, this would be a CAD drawing of a wall. And realistically, from a CAD perspective, it just points to the actual materials, tells us what they are, and we're quite comfortable with that. And we assign a description to that quantification, and off we go and get our contractors the price. Building information modeling is a whole lot more. It's an object that has a load of information in it. So you can see it visually. If you right click it, show the object properties, you see a world of information, and it depends on the detail in the model. If it's an early model, you mightn't see so much other than a slight specification possibly and some geometric information. But later on in your LOD 400, 500, so to speak, or if it's the UK version 4 or 5, you'll see a world, a huge amount of information. So it's wading, as a quantity surveyor, it's wading through that information. For us, that's the problem, or at least in my own experience, that's the problem. Picking out what we need and what we don't need. And when you're starting off, it's daunting because there's nearly too much information there. So moving on from that, the dimensions, I'll run through these quite quickly because I'm sure they've been dealt with before. 3D is obviously our architectural 3D, I suppose, three-dimensional version of the model. And that would obviously include your structural and your building services information. And I suppose from a kind of a BIM perspective, that could be the federated model, the composite model, the combination of the design disciplines in one model. Now, at the moment, we're not really there. We're not getting full federated models. We're still getting individual models, if we are getting models at all. But that's what 3D is. 4D is the focus on time, and that's a focus on utilizing BIM for space management, scheduling, clash detection. And in fact, that was where it all kind of started in the US. The contractors used to take the 2D information and used to BIM it up into a 3D model and start finding where the issues are in those drawings. And it was a way of them to work through a lot of change orders and stick in a lot of requests for information in that regard, and possibly make a bit more money, but on change orders. But from a utilization point of view, I think it's a very powerful part inside of BIM. The 5D is what we're going to look at today. Sorry, I jumped 5D onto 6D, which is your sustainability, your thermal energy modeling, your energy efficiency. Your 5D, which is I'm going to talk briefly today, and your 7D, which is your life cycle, your operational phase of the building. And that's the real power of building information modeling. And that's why building information modeling in the UK back in 2010, 2011 was pushed as a kind of a tool for public sector procurement, because what the public sector want is essentially an asset information model. They want that digital twin, and they want to utilize it in the operational phase. They don't really worry too much what you do in your design and construction phase. But they want the product of that. What they got before was a bit chaotic, and we can all probably agree on that. A lot of the time, the client doesn't, walks into that building for the first time and doesn't necessarily, get what they want, what they envisaged. But certainly from an asset point of view, they're getting the physical asset and they're getting the digital asset, and they can utilize that then much better in terms of operation. So BIM is a visual database, and you'll hear words like, from a QS perspective, you'll hear words from me like processing, mapping, coding. So there's new terminology there. There's other words, mining, filtering. And what it means, essentially, we're going about our quantification, we're going about our measurement, we're going about our cost planning and bills of quantities production slightly different way. It's not about the manufacture of information of quantities. It's about the actual reading of that information that's already there. And it's about being comfortable with it. It's about validating it. And it's about utilizing it in a way that we can present in the same way to our client, be it a cost plan in an NRM format or a bill of quantities in our ARM format. So what are we doing from a processing mapping perspective? And the document goes through this. We're changing the structure of the model from an output that is in line with depending what the authoring model is, the design software. It could be in Revit, and it has the Revit kind of hierarchy structure to it, category, family, and type, into a quantification and I suppose a measurement that aligns to our classification systems, be it National Standard Building Element, elements are the International Construction Measurement Standard, or even ARM4, although it's a bit contentious how applicable ARM, that level of detail is to building information modeling, but we'll briefly discuss that in a second. So mapping and processing, again, don't worry too much about this. You'll read it for yourself in the information paper. All I kind of really want to get through today is that processing, I suppose, from a terminology perspective, is where we maybe utilize, see, I have a QSID and that information there on the right-hand side. So this kind of column of information is supposed to simulate what might be a wall. Okay, in this case, is a render 2 and 5 concrete block. So the wall, of course, visually you'll see it in the model, but from an object point of view, from a data point of view, you'll see a lot of information. Now, you'll see a lot more information than I'm showing on the right-hand side of your screen there. And in that information could be a QSID. Now, who's going to put that in there? I always get that from colleagues of mine or friends that went to college with or whatnot. I'm not going into the architectural software and sticking in a code so that I can take off my quantity. That'll take me forever. And plus, I'm not paying Revit $3 or $5 or Autodesk a license to just do that one thing. Well, you can do it in which is pre-processing. You do it in the model, and it's worth having a kind of a somewhat working knowledge of ArchiCAD or Revit, but it's not needed. You can still do it in your cost software. So be it in your Cupid, or you're in Costex, or you're utilizing BIM Vision or QB or whatever your software is, you can actually do your filtering there. Or you don't have to do it at all. You can output your quantities automatically and see what you can use in your traditional way of producing cost plans and bill quantities. So just be familiar with maybe those two concepts. The documentation explains that processing and mapping. Processing being the coding part, and then mapping is changing it into what we need from a national standard building elements perspective. Okay, so we can do it a number of different ways, and I tried to do this because I wrote this part myself of the document. Tried to explain it very simply to the layperson, someone that was reading it as an old supervisor of mine used to say, the intellectual 14-year-old can understand it. And that's the kind of focus here, to make it as simple and not make it technology orientated. So I'm not saying use Costex, use Cupid, use this particular software. I'm saying that they all have similarities in the way they do these things. That's quite different than what you're used to in terms of the on-screen measurement. So I go back to what I was saying earlier about this BIM dump. There is some software, and Costex is one of those, where you can actually press that BIM red button and out pops a load of quantities. Now, the format it comes out in, and it'll quantify the entire model. Now, it'll quantify only what's in the model. So if it's an early model, there won't be a whole lot. If it's obviously a detailed model, it'll be quite a bit. And a lot of those quantities are very usable, especially counts and areas and wall areas, etc. But you just got to be careful using it verbatim in your quantification. And what it does is it quantifies, and you can see here on the right-hand side here, it'll take the hierarchy structure of the Revit model, what it's coming out of, or an IFC model, which is an interoperable file, and it'll quantify based on that schema, that structure, not any sort of quantities of AN structure, not any sort of National Standard Building Elements, ICMS. It'll quantify based on that structure. Now, that structure is devised in such a way that is quite similar to our elemental structure. So just be aware of that. This can be very beneficial, just pressing that BIM red button and seeing what you get out. Okay, now not all softwares can do that. And that would be the start of your kind of BIM process, I think, whereby if you have software that can do that, do it. See what quantities come out, especially your counts, your M&E stuff, your light bulb counts, your door counts, your sanitary fittings counts. Huge advantages in a big model, a big building, just pressing the button and getting those counts. Okay, so you can see, maybe you can't, it's pretty blurry, and apologies for that, it's a pretty blurry drawing. On the left-hand side is an export from IFC. That's the open BIM format. Again, I know this terminology might be a bit new to you guys. Have a look at the document that explains what they are. It's an export, an automated export from IFC on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it's an automated export from DWFX, which is the interoperable file from Autodesk. Now, it's mainly used for collaboration across Autodesk products, from going from Navis, Revit to Navis Works, or Revit to Revit Structure, etc. Whereas the IFC is your pure BIM interoperable file. It's supposedly, no matter what software you're working in, if you get an IFC file, you should be able to open that file. It's like a PDF. It's a read-only BIM file format. And you'll notice that they're quite similar. So if you're working in Cupid, you'll be working on IFC. If you're working in Costex, you'll be able to use DWFX and IFC files. If you're working in BIM Vision, it's IFC files, and most other software, it's the IFC, and the IFC is the future. So just be aware of that. From an automation point of view, from a quantity point of view, getting into a little bit more detail, and I'll leave it up to you guys to take those steps and when the time comes. But you will have the ability to do this mapping. Okay, so you might say, okay, I'm going to use the database, the BIM database, to say folder name is going to be based on my QSID, and that could be my element 21 external walls. The subfolder name is going to be based on my family name of my Revit object. And then I'm going to combine the description of type name and structural material together to give me a description. And what happens then is you get a little more formulated output. Now, this takes a little bit of a progressive step into building information modeling from a quantification point of view. And it's kind of hard to explain in one slide. But if you're taking anything from this particular presentation in this regard, it just gives you the manipulability in the software. And again, most softwares have a mapping functionality. Cupid has it, Costex has it, and others have it. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you have, you'll still be able to take this step. And all that doesn't give you an automated quantification that you can utilize straight away in your cost plan. But what it does is it prepares you and gives you a breakdown per the National Standard Building Elements. So then it makes it a lot easier to put it into your traditional cost plan. Now that last part of the process is still quite manual, but that early part in terms of quantification is becoming more automated. Now we're still on a hybrid approach. You still won't be able to go away from not measuring your gross floor area and possibly doing a lot of 2D takeoff, because our measurement rules are still based around that criteria. But just be aware that there is ways of automating your quantities quite quickly. Then there's the advanced mapping, and again, I'm not going to get into a huge amount of detail because I haven't got the time. But this gives us an opportunity to not only map the identity data of the building information modeling, but start to derive quantities from the model that aren't necessarily there or shown. So for example, here in the red box, you'll see I can derive the reinforcement of a concrete column from its volume times its kg divided by 1,000 to give us tonnage. If the volume dimension isn't there, or I want to check it, and it is there, I can multiply by length, by width, by my height to see, is it aligning up? Or I can calculate my formwork based on my perimeter of my column times my height. And again, that former quantity wouldn't bear. So these are model derived quantities. Everything isn't going to be in the model, just like everything's not in the drawing, and I have to derive these quantities from a 2D drawing. It's just a different way of doing it. So that's the last stage of really getting into automated mapping. And again, take your incremental steps in that regard, and that might be down the line for you guys. Or if you're already doing automated takeoff from the BIM red button, so to speak, this may be the next step for you. Rory's not here. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. Rory was the author that looked at 4D, and it's beyond my expertise. A little bit of a knowledge to, in that regard, and maybe that's saying something for a quantity surveyor. Not necessarily focusing on having expertise in scheduling, the link between the schedule and the cost, but that's essentially what 4D does. Looking at constructability, looking at space management, and maybe those of you that are contractors, QSs, have more expertise in that regard. But it's a very powerful tool. As I said before, that's where it started. That's the roots of building information modeling, at least was in the US, when the contractors started realizing, well, it doesn't matter what the design team do. I can, the design, build, procurement, I can design this up in detailed design and start utilizing the model for efficiency purposes in relation to its constructability, its scheduling, its cost, its time. There's a section on BIM and the ICS. Again, I don't have a huge amount of time, but what I want you to kind of get from that is that the ICMS is a codable document. It's a little bit easier than our national standard building elements to utilize in building information modeling. It would be nice, and this may be coming somewhere down the line, if all the objects in a model had already embedded ICMS code. If that's the case, filtering becomes a whole lot easier, and we don't have to do a whole lot of processing. We just filter the way we want the model to come out in terms of level 1 or level 2 or level 3 ICMS codes, and out pops our quantification based on that structure. And I'll leave it at that because I'm not sure what kind of how I'm doing with time. I usually go over, but thanks very much. And if you have any questions, dermot.kelly@tudublin.ie. I'd be delighted to answer.
Thanks very much, Dermot. Just while we pass over to Ross, if you want to set up your slides there, Ross, I'll just mention that
yeah, no bother.
In the chat, there is a link to the document that's available on the website, so you can download that. And again, we'll have a recording of today's CPD available at that location as well. If you do have any questions for any of the presenters, if you'd like to put them into the Q&A for us, we'll take those at the end of all the presentations. So please pop in your questions there, and we'll get through as many of them as we possibly can at the end. So I'll just pass you over to Ross now. Ross, I think we're just, I don't know if you're using dual screens there, but we're seeing.
Yeah, you're seeing the presentation. Okay, let me just jump out of that there a second, and I'll share my screen a second. Yeah. 2 seconds, so guys, I'll try screen 2 here and see, does this work for you? How's that now, James?
That's not coming up yet. Is there a change display setting that you have there? This is the problem with QSs, they always have dual screens.
Did it come up there now?
No,
you want me to start, Ross?
You can do it, Ilya, yeah, if you want. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working on my side. Technology, it's awesome. No, okay. You tried there, so yeah.
No problem.
Awesome.
Turn off the direct, right?
Yeah. While you're doing that, Ilya, sure, I can give a bit of an introduction. James mentioned that for you guys that don't know Cosmos, we were founded in Denmark, Copenhagen, a number of years ago, and we have been working in BIM as QSs for around 7 years as individuals, and we're very much focused on BIM and 5D deliverables in all our projects actually today. And we have recently opened an office here in Ireland, and our intention here is basically to assist with our experience that we've gathered over the last number of years, and help companies here in Ireland to increase their knowledge base when it comes to BIM and 5D. And that's kind of what we were doing with Dermot and the SCSI on this document, is giving basically our practical experience that we've gained from project to project, and how we basically set up these kind of deliverables. How are we getting on? So there,
You should be already seeing my screen.
okay.
You're working perfectly there now.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Awesome. So yeah, this is Cosmos. We're a group of 6 people, and as I say, we have been working with BIM for about 7 years. Collaborative deliverables with design teams, and we've different backgrounds and different experiences when it comes to traditional quantity surveying and cost management. But our focus here is really the digital delivery in BIM, that 5D, 6D, and 7D aspect. You could go on there earlier.
Yeah.
So oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Brilliant. This is a slide that we use in all our presentation, and it's called value-driven cost management. And it's really focusing on the process of traditional QSing and cost management deliverables. Go back one. And looking at collaborative integrated deliveries. And this is something we're going to talk about here in our presentation. While BIM, we talk about technologies and the software, we also need to focus on the process, because without a collaborative process, we will not get the information that we need at the end. So quality, in our opinion, is everybody's responsibility. Time, cost, and quality is everybody's responsibility, not just the architects, not just the engineers, not just the project managers, not just the QSs. We're all in this as a group and a team together. And I know there's questions relating to contractual requirements and so on, but this is a mindset that we now need to get in place. BIM is bringing us closer together with all stakeholders. So we need to change how we view project delivery and get more integrated with the design teams in how we deliver and produce our material. So integrated 3D design, where the QS and design teams sit together. We as QSs cannot sit on the fence anymore and wait for information to be delivered to us. We have to be at the table. We have to be with the teams. And what we focus on this little illustration here is that there's a discipline lead for each part of the design, architect or engineer or MEP, electrical or plumbing, what have you. There's a modeler that produces the 3D information for the design disciplines, and there's a cost manager that needs to manage that information with them in order for us as QSs and cost managers to get the information from the 3D model that we need to do our role and our task. Exactly as Dermot explained earlier, you can wait and get a model and work with it and do a BIM dump, but if you really want to add value in this BIM environment, you have to sit at the table and get involved in the conversation during the design stages. Next one. So the design process, right now, our opinion is the QS is the last kind of discipline to review design material before it's released. That means we have control on the quality of design information before it goes to either up to the client for review at each of the gateways of design stages, or out to market at tender stage. So we have a responsibility here for quality, really. And again, it comes back to contractual requirements. But if we remove the contractual requirement for a minute, we should really be looking at how we can best improve the project's quality before it goes out. And of course, the QS, in order for this to happen, should be in the middle of this process as the design is developing. So where cost plans are created and design estimates are created while the design is developing, not waiting to the very end once the design is complete at each stage, and then taking on the documentation and information to generate our output. It is far more productive and value driven if we're involved and building it the same way the architects build the design, the same way the engineers build the design. We sit with them and build our cost plans and cost estimates. Of course, we have a budget to work to, but if we're involved in the conversation, we can guide the architects and engineers' solutions before they actually spend a lot of hours and a lot of time on it. And that's a huge amount of value for the different stakeholders. Thanks, Elia. So the digital QS is BIM world, and the digital QS is a kind of a term we've coined back in 2019. And what we're saying is that the digital QS, without integrated collaboration, we cannot succeed. We will never get the information we need from the design teams if we're not sitting with them and working with them. We can, of course, as Dermot pointed out, take information from the modeling, but it's much more difficult and time consuming to take a 3D model cold and then try to work with it. It's far more productive developing the model with the design teams through the process.
Exactly, Ross, and I think that's something that Dermot mentioned. Are we gonna do the same we are doing right now in 5 years' time, in 10-year time? The fact is that the profession or our skill has to adjust to that, right? So we are not going to limit our profession to measuring and estimating and working or relying on what we receive, but actually now we need to learn how the design process works. We need to learn how to handle and manage that data that we are receiving, right? And to do that, we cannot rely on them to produce it. We have actually to do the input for them to assure that that information will be there, correct?
And that's key, I think, is that our role is now changing. We've become data managers and data analysts as opposed to traditional quantity surveyors for quantity outtake. So what we're currently doing is we're moving into a quality role as opposed to a quantitative role, where we are embedding ourselves in the design process to make sure quality is there for our client, to protect their interests in terms of budget and scope and delivery. And I think that is key here. And likewise, these illustrations, what they show there is that there is different design disciplines produce different information. And we need to understand that each discipline operates and works differently. But Ilya, I think you have the next few slides.
Yeah, essentially we are becoming more involved in the design process. That means that we also need to be reading at information at different stages. We are no longer receiving something that is produced, but we are actually collaborating with them to edit that. So whenever we are having different disciplines, we potentially will be also working with different softwares. Everybody mentions Revit as the tool for generating. The reality is that there is not a tool that fits all disciplines and all types of designs. So all these design is produced in totally different softwares. And honestly, I haven't even opened Tekla, but is the most common software, I think, for example, producing structural drawings, or ArchiCAD for landscaping, or etc. So we are not really working with the softwares. We are just working with the design team, telling them what we expect to receive from each of them. This means that we are more aware of what are they producing and what level of detail we are going to receive in the different stages of the design process.
Just a note on that, Ilya, on the level of detail. At different stages of the project lifecycle, different disciplines produce different levels of detail. So on a LOD 100, which is just geometric, you get very little from the MEP disciplines on that. It is generally architecture and construction, and that needs to be understood. What information we expect to receive at the different stages allows us to plan how we expect to build our cost estimates and cost plans based on the information.
And while it's more or less standardized in all the design processes. It actually varies by type of building. For instance, if it's a more architectural building, like school and office, potentially what comes first is the higher detail on architectural, because it's what is a discipline that is going to drive the output of the building, the functionality, etc. While if you are looking at a more a facility for installations, a data center, something that which like the main function is installations. That's what potentially comes first, so they get an awareness of the volumes, and then the architectural is secondary and will come after, just to do the enclosure, correct? So this is something that quantity surveyors didn't need to know before, and we didn't care because we were just receiving the information that was there. But now we need to be aware of this because our delivery is going to depend directly on these type of concepts.
And all of this will be identified in the BIM execution plan that is very vital to QSs to also get involved in. It's not an.
I think we lost you, Ross, there, but I just continue talking on your behalf. The BIM execution plan, which is produced as part of the initial contractual documents, probably produced even before the design team gets on board on a competition, because it's prepared by the consultants. That's a key document that is going to drive the level of detail, the information content in the different deliveries for the different disciplines, and the information that we need to work with. So it's essential, if you have the chance, or if you're a consultant, to have a special eye on that and make it work for the quantity surveyors that are going to use that the documentation later. Dermot was mentioning before, this is only a peak of all the information and data you can get from the models, and that is true. We get so much information, and that's not necessarily useful for us if hasn't been produced properly, like sheet in, sheet out, right? This is the document that is going to prevent that from happening is your BIM execution plan. And that's going to drive basically the quality and the content of all your deliveries across the different stages of the project. Just going to speed up here. Regarding the information, all the parameters, as you can see, we receive a lot of information that I don't even need to know. But I was missing the system type in this specific project, meaning that essentially all the main key of information that I needed to use to split all my systems, it was missing. And the only way to prevent that is not to rely on what you are receiving, is actually to collaborate with the designers. Don't blame them for bad quality of it. Essentially, they don't know what you need. So they need that hand to guide them, right? And they appreciate it a lot to know what you actually need, and it's not that much work for them to work with that. Basically, when producing or when working with all this information received from BIM, we produce different types of deliveries. These different types of deliveries, in this case, is linked directly to the model. We try to have that as a live connection, so that whenever the design team is updating something, we can quickly update our estimate. We start building a cost plan with very low detail, depending on the information that is in the models and depending on what the plan, BIM execution plan, has defined for that delivery. And then we extend that estimate and that cost plan with the additional information that we are receiving, not necessarily at the end of the phase, but actually it can also be of help to update it periodically as soon as information is available. So you don't wait till the very end. You have actually live updates of your estimate. Ongoing.
And just to comment there, when it's linked to the models, that is linked to the models we use. So we use a software, Costex. You're familiar with that. It's just a software that we use, but we import the IFC, so it's not directly linked to the architect and engineer's models. It is our own. So we update on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on the stage of the project.
Yeah. All softwares do this, and it is actually a good point there, Ross. All softwares do that as per today. I would say what you mean is that we are not receiving updates as how they change the world, and we receive the update immediately, and that's how it should be. We want a qualified version, so we only use the versions of the documents that they have shared with the other disciplines to coordinate between them. So we became a new discipline in the design process, if you understand what I mean. So whenever the architect uploads their design so that the structural discipline can update their model as per that, we as cost discipline, we update our cost as well. It becomes a more involved process rather than being totally disconnected at the very end of the phases. As I was saying, there is a possibility of update on the go, your estimate, and as well as actually focusing on what has changed from the previous design in a quick way. So you can benefit from, even if you are only using BIM for visualizations, right? You can actually overlap the different versions and get an understanding of what has changed since last time you looked at that, and then you can ignore everything else and then focus on what has changed.
That's an important tool for the design disciplines when talking about impact of change. From a design disciplines perspective, they might not have made that much change in terms of within the 3D models, but actually once you visualize it, you can see quite a big impact in terms of what the cost manager needs to do and how they work with the information. So those previous models show quite a lot of change, even though coming from the disciplines, they say, well, we didn't make that many changes, but actually you did, and that has a cost impact and time impact, of course. So yeah.
So for us as a quantity surveying company, it's very interesting to visualize. If I go back to the previous slide, right, when we are having the discussions with our clients and they say there has been a very little update since last time to look at it, can you quickly update the estimate? And then we show them this. Okay, it wasn't that small as you believed, right? Where blue is what has been unaltered, but all the rest of the colors is something that we need to look at, either for price or quantity or update. So even though it's a good tool for quick update, it still requires time, and a quick estimate is not 1 hour potentially. It might be a little more, and something that helps us to discuss with our clients to agree on the scope of the task. Every single discipline or every different discipline is going to have their own model. In basic projects, we may have 8, 9, 10 different disciplines: landscaping, fire, acoustics, utility. So that means that we are processing a lot of information, a lot of volume, and we are able to do these updates in a week time for all the disciplines in a team of 2 or 3 people. And this is something that we could not have achieved if we were not getting the power of digitalization at this stage. We can work much faster on these small tasks or repetitive tasks that can be automated, so that we can focus on bringing value, focusing on what has changed and why, and how can we find better alternatives maybe to bring the project on budget. It also helps our clients so they don't design too far out of budget, but actually can catch whenever there is a deviation as per the target before the design team spends a lot of hours. Just think that for us, it is 3 hours of a QS bringing value. But for the design team, if there are 10 different disciplines designing towards an option that is actually not on budget, it might be hundreds of hours just in 3 days. So it's something that our clients appreciate quite a lot. Going back to the topic, it's important to understand as well the quality and the accuracy, because we are working on the go. We not always get the fully qualified versions, and that's where we as QSs need to change our mindset a little, and also help the team, since we are a bit more involved now and not that disconnected, to pick up these things. We are essentially the first ones that are going to see the design that they're producing before the client and the contractor. So we are also catching a lot of these overlaps and wrong labels and etc., that we have tried to list and pick all of them in the document that has been published today. So even if you are not working with it, it will give you an overview of what to focus and what to look at whenever you start getting more involved with a digital delivery and a digital material.
Yeah. And I suppose a new aspect here, of course, is that we're now part of the design team. We're there to support the design team in their deliverables. We're there to add value to the design information and embed ourselves in that, identifying errors and within the design information, and then notifying the architect and engineers during the process that there's something amiss here, guys. What exactly is happening? There seems to be 2 doors here, one behind the other. Is that an error, or have we got some kind of new strange design on double doors? And that, of course, adds a lot of value, as well as the coding structures that, and if it is uniclass, have they used uniclass? Is it consistent throughout all the documentation, or is there discrepancies in between specification on the left and the BIM information on the right, where it's 2 different classification codes? What's going on there? Generally, that's a copy and paste process that they have gone through and actually haven't updated. So this type of stuff adds value.
Something that we have realized after experience is that even we believe that we were disconnected from the process. The reality is that actually inside the design team, there is also different sub-disciplines, if you want to call them that way. There is the person who designs, there is the discipline lead who attends the meetings, and then there is a person who do the details, and there is a person who do the descriptions. This team, we believe they are coordinated, but the reality, and you guys probably have experienced it if you are in the contractor and you are receiving the document, they are not necessarily, because a lot of things happen in the end, and it's complicated to coordinate them, and it's just bad quality. But as Ross was saying before, in this triangle right now, because everybody is getting food or getting information from the design, we are able to catch these connections and work all together to make the link in between the different documentation that is produced, thanks to that coding system, the reference system.
Yeah. We have to jump on. We've 10 minutes left. This is more examples of where we can pick out issues and I suppose discrepancies and accuracy in the design information specification.
Yeah. Dermot was mentioning before, if you only use the models for visualization, that's first step. That's how I started. That's how it helped me to understand the level of quality of the models, and also if there were errors, or if I was pricing something incorrectly, not relying necessarily on this dump output and getting all the quantities with a pivot table in Excel. That's how I started. But actually looking at the geometries and getting more accurate on the pricing and the quantification that I was reading, to not limiting myself to a pivot table. Just more examples, some elements that might be wrong. We don't need everything to be on the model. We can essentially take care of duplicates, but also take care of things that we don't need to have them, but we can derive those elements and these quantities. And I don't know if you have noticed, we are repeating the same sentence in every single slide. Do not wait until the end. It will be too late, and it will really be, these things can be solved by collaborating with the design team and getting them sorted. They need to be done sooner or later, so the sooner they are, the better for everybody. This is more examples, I believe, of different benefits of collaborating with the team. I'm going to pass them, Ross, if that's okay with you.
The document will be sent out anyway by Michelle and the SCSI, so you can have a read through it if you want. So really, I think our message here is that if we want to really get involved in BIM as QSs, we need to get involved in the process. We need to be at the table, we need to be sitting with the teams, and we need to be having these discussions on collaborative, integrated deliveries. Otherwise, we will never get the true value, and our clients will never get the true value from this digital process. Automation, of course, will improve how we prepare cost plans and cost estimates. And we as QSs, as I mentioned before, create the value, but we also create the link between modeled information, specifications, quantification, and effectively price, and that's where we sit. Some examples here of automation that we have implemented.
Yeah, I will just mention quickly here. There is obviously not everything is on the model, and it's not going to be ever. It doesn't need to be logistics and elements that are probably not designed. So that's where, of course, we still need to keep them. We cannot rely on the information we are receiving and pricing only that. We also need to essentially understand the project, add additional costs for whenever there is need for, or manually measuring from the details if those elements are not part of the 3D models, then it's just the detail on the sections.
And the conclusion here, value-driven cost management, integrated and collaborative. That has to be key. And the QS needs to understand the 3D process. We need to have an appreciation for the architects and engineers' process of design so that we can complement it and complement their output in terms of quality. Regular communication, as I say, sitting at the table, having these discussions and assisting in our delivery will add value. And do not wait until the end. Get involved, as our presentation or slide said there. At the end is too late, because it will cost too much to improve and go back and redesign. And quality is everybody's responsibility, not just the architects and engineers. And you can write to us, guys. We have some, if you get your phones ready, you can take some pictures here of our LinkedIn pages, and it'll automatically update for you. So get in contact, write to us. We're here to help. If your company is interested in looking at this and developing it, we're here to assist you guys. And if anybody is looking at has questions relating to a project, just come and ask. You know, this is all about communication, as we say, and assistance to bring up this quality level in the industry.
We'd really love to talk about it, and we have been there at some point before. We were not born learning. We have had a lot of trial and error, and right now we would have appreciated to have someone out there to actually guide us. So we are here, essentially. We are here. You can join us on LinkedIn if you want to see more related content. We try to bring it closer and explain our experiences so that we are sharing knowledge in this regard.
That's it, I suppose, is it, Ilya? Yeah, thanks very much. We kind of ran through that a little bit there, James. I hope you caught all that. And my internet connection is really poor today, so I'm cutting in and out. But,
we cannot see your pretty face, Ross.
No, thank God, everybody says. But we have a few minutes left for some questions, if possible. Up to you, James.
Great, thank you, Elliot and Ross. I can see Dermot's fielded a couple of questions in the chat, which is great. Thanks, Dermot, for that. I'll borrow your phrase, Elliot. Ask your question now. Don't wait until the end; it'll be too late. I think you've brought across very clearly that BIM is not just about technology; it's about people and processes as well. Very much so, and we've got a couple of questions on that just in the Q&A. So the first one I just have here is a bill of quantities formed by ARM still the best process for a contractor to price if we have a digital model that generates information in a different process?
You would like to reply to this one, Ross?
Yeah, and Dermot, I'm going to kill my video here again. But ARM 4 and with our new ARM 5 coming out, I think we have challenges, of course, because the level of detail we require in ARM, we will never get that information from the model. We have a lot of work as QSs to generate our bills of quantities.
Yeah, can I just come in? Yeah. I don't think, we're not going to be able to at any stage, because they're not aligned. Those two methodologies are not aligned in any way, shape, or form. The BOQ is very much still a 2D document. Now that may change. I don't know what's going to happen with an ARM 5 and the coding structure, but it surely will still be quite detailed for the contractor to price. But we can still do a processing on the model that makes it compatible with our ARM. So what I mean by that is it's not going to fully be automated. We still have that manual last stage process. But if you think about it, if the quantification is automated, well, then you're significantly saving time in relation to production of the ARM. So even though it's not aligned, and it may be somewhere down the line, to be more BIM friendly, I think it's still very advantageous.
Thanks. Dermot, you might be able to take this one just in terms of there's a lot of resources that are in the document in terms of links to useful resources on YouTube videos and so on. So in terms of kind of getting people who may not be familiar with BIM software, is there a way for QSs to kind of try out software, to get a trial, to play around with the product?
Get a free trial of any of the software we've mentioned. Again, the document, I've tried to be very you know, not expounding any sort of software. I have my own ideas, what I like, what I don't like, and that's my own preferences. If you're using Qubit, they have a good interface now with respect to BIM. They don't quite give you a huge amount of ability in mapping, but it's still a very good, simple piece of BIM software to start with. So if you're using Qubit, I mean, there's a tool that's, I believe, is free with it. There may be a slight upgrade in terms of cost. Costex is the same and has good functionality in respect to BIM. If you're not using either one of those, I've come across a good one called BIM Vision, and that's free. It's a free IFC viewer. And that's a good start, and it has a plugin that costs, I think, €140, that does advanced reports that you can extract quantities from the model in Excel. So if you wanted to just have someone in the office play around with it, you know, that's it could be an option. But there's so many softwares out there, and it's not necessarily, you know, one versus the other. And
what we've learned is that each software is slightly different. But it's also very different to the process that we currently have. So there is a learning requirement here, regardless of the software you choose to take on board. But there's many YouTube videos that you can check out, like from all the software vendors, that will give you introductions and.
We keep listening, Ross.
Oh, there's a world of information there. I've included some links as well in the document. You know, it's very hard to, in a document of 30 or 40 pages, to get everything that's involved in relation to building information modeling. So if I talk about the ISO, or we talk about ISO 19650 or past documents, there's a link to that information. If we talk about building smart and IFC, there's a link to hyperlink to that information. There's a link to YouTube videos that I produce for my students that are quite handy, 15-minute videos, just to get an idea what we discussed today in terms of processing. So in that regard, it's got a world of information additional to what's been discussed there.
Yeah,
there's a wealth of information there. I'm conscious we are at the hour, but there's a couple more questions I would like to squeeze in if we have 1 or 2 more minutes. One in particular, just on sustainability, that's quite an important one I'd like to cover if we can. Is it possible to add information about components and products with regards to sustainability? Maybe Ross and Elliot, how do you handle that, or do you?
Yeah, exactly. So there is now the question is the design model the right tool to store that information, or are we actually waiting for a software or a better tool to work with sustainability? That would be my comment.
Yeah, if we're talking about tools, there's one we were using on a project recently called the Rufus. It's a German one where you can upload product information. You can calculate embedded carbon within the building element, and then push that information back into Revit, and it's stored within the digital asset. That was quite interesting. But this is kind of a new area in terms of digitization, and I don't think there's a solution being totally solved for that yet. But definitely that was the best we've seen anyway in terms of integration between different softwares. The Rufus, Google it.
I think there's
ask me.
Yeah, I think there's huge potential in that area. Let's do get that answer to that question. He's just recently completed his PhD, so fair play to him.
Yeah.
You know, from the whole calculation, you know, where that's something I think we will be expected to do. You know, when we get the opportunity to evaluate embodied carbon from a sustainability point of view. I mean, it's pretty. You know, we have all the bells and whistles of quantities of A in terms of measurement rules, but with embodied carbon, we don't. So it should be easy enough to put an embodied carbon calculation versus an object, and then simulate that calculation from the model.
So right now we can calculate that on Costex the same way as we calculate the quantitative in terms of price. We can also calculate the embedded carbon once we have the metrics around that. The process is the same, of course, but that's outside the Revit model. If you want to embed it in it, then you have to look at a different system outside of the traditional estimating tools. But that's definitely something that's going to get a lot of steam and headway this year.
And I think we have a number of follow-on BIM CPDs that we might look at that topic later on in the year, but just aware of in the calendar coming up, we do have a number of follow-on CPDs, so we'll be continuing the conversation. And as you said, Ellie and Ross, LinkedIn is a great way of keeping in touch and continuing the conversation. We are unfortunately out of time, so if anyone did miss just the links there for LinkedIn, you can drop me a line. I'll be happy to share them. You can contact me at james@scsi.ie. So it just remains to say thank you again to Elia, Dermot and Ross. Thank you to Cosmos, to TU Dublin, and to the BIM QS working group. for the input on the documents. And thank you all for attending. So look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.
James.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks,
Thanks, James. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.